Cameron was down to his last sandwich. Not his last for the week, his last period. It was wrapped in crinkled wax paper, flattened from being sat on inside his backpack, and filled with nothing more than half a slice of bologna and some off-brand mustard. No cheese, no lettuce, just carbs and survival. He sat alone on the edge of a fountain in the city plaza, jacket zipped up to his chin to fight the wind, trying to stretch out the moment before he'd have to eat it. Because when the sandwich was gone, there would be nothing else to look forward to. Not dinner, not breakfast, not hope. Cameron was 26, recently jobless, 3 months behind on rent, and sleeping most nights in the corner of a 24-hour laundromat that the owner didn't patrol until 7 a.m. He hadn't always lived like this. 2 years ago, he'd had a warehouse job, a cheap studio, and enough money to help his sister with school supplies for her kids. But layoffs happened. Then his car broke down. Then his savings ran out. And when one thing fell apart, the rest followed like dominoes. Now the only time anyone spoke to him was to tell him to move. He opened the wax paper and took a small bite, chewing slowly. Not because he was savoring it, but because when you're poor, you learn to ration even time. That's when he noticed her. She sat across the plaza on a bench near the bakery, wrapped in a neat trench coat with a leather purse in her lap. She was older, mid-50s maybe, and dressed like someone waiting for a rideshare. Her hair was styled, her posture relaxed. She didn't seem homeless, but she also didn't move. What stood out was her face. She looked lost. Not in a confused way, but in a heavy, sinking kind of way. Like someone holding a pain they had no language for. Cameron glanced back down at his sandwich. He took one more bite, then stood. He crossed the plaza quietly, the wind tugging at the loose laces of his shoes, and approached the bench. "Excuse me," he said, his voice soft and raspy from disuse. "Are you okay?" The woman blinked, startled. Her eyes were red, mascara faintly smudged. "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. Cameron nodded. Then, without thinking, he held out the sandwich. "It's not much," he said, "but you look like you might need it more." She stared at him like he'd just offered her gold. And for the first time in weeks, someone looked directly at Cameron, not past him. He didn't wait for her to accept. Just gently placed the sandwich next to her on the bench and walked away. No name, no expectation, just the last thing he had to give. What he didn't know was who she really was, and how that simple act would echo louder than any scream for help. The sandwich sat beside her for a long time. She didn't touch it at first, just stared at it, as if trying to make sense of the moment, as if wondering how a stranger who clearly had so little would be the only person that day to ask if she was okay. The woman's name was Lillian Hawthorne, though Cameron didn't know that, and she didn't offer it. She hadn't planned to sit on that bench. In fact, she was supposed to be on a plane that morning, New York to Zurich, finalizing the merger her firm had spent 6 months negotiating. Lillian was the kind of woman who led with numbers, closed deals in boardrooms with 50-floor views, and rarely took lunch without a calendar alert. But none of that mattered anymore. Because 12 hours earlier, everything that made sense in her world, everything she'd worked for, built, earned, had shattered with one phone call. Her son Dylan had taken his own life. 23, bright, quiet, generous, the kind of soul who volunteered at the animal shelter and never missed a Mother's Day call. And yet, he never said a word about his pain. Now Lillian sat on that bench like a ghost in designer shoes. Number angry, empty. And then came this boy, this man really, though life had worn him like a rag, offering her food. Not pity, not a sales pitch. Just something warm, something real. When she finally unwrapped the sandwich, her hands trembled. She took a bite. It was cold, flattened, slightly sour, and it was the most human thing anyone had given her in days. Across the plaza, Cameron sat back at the fountain, pretending not to look. He hadn't expected her to eat it. Most people would have thrown it away. Some might have called security. But something in her face, something broken in a way he recognized, had pulled him across that plaza like gravity. Because grief knows grief. And hunger, it recognizes its own reflection. even when it's not about food. The next morning, Cameron returned to the plaza, not expecting anything, just habit. But Lillian was there, same bench, same coat, same stillness. She didn't speak when she saw him, but she gave the faintest nod, one of acknowledgement, one of gratitude. Cameron sat on the edge of the fountain again, didn't approach her this time, but later when he rose to leave, he found something sitting beside his backpack, a warm croissant wrapped in a napkin. Nothing fancy, but intentional. He looked across the plaza. Lillian was gone, but the croissant remained, and with it a message that said without saying, "I saw you too." It was the beginning of something neither of them could name, yet it became a ritual. No words, no schedule, just presence. Every morning around 7:10, Cameron would sit at the edge of the fountain, backpack beside him, hoodie pulled tight against the wind, pretending to read a newspaper he'd fished from a trash can 2 days earlier. And every morning Lillian would appear, coat buttoned, hair immaculate, sitting on the same bench across the plaza, a paper bag or napkin-wrapped item resting in her hands. Sometimes it was a muffin, sometimes a sandwich. Once, a small thermos of hot tea with a sticky note taped to the side that simply read, "Warm things help." She never handed it to him directly. She would just leave it nearby when he wasn't looking, and he would find it moments later, as if the plaza itself had delivered a message in pastry form. He never asked her why. She never asked if he wanted it, and yet every bite felt like a conversation, like someone was saying, "You matter." Cameron didn't know who she was, but he began to notice things, the way she stared at the ground, sometimes for long stretches of time, like waiting for something to rise out of it, the way her hands clenched when children passed by holding hands with their parents, the way she would bring two coffees and drink only one. Pain has a way of shaping the body, and hers was sculpted with silence. And still, she came. Day after day, week after week. Sometimes she'd leave a note, not full sentences, just fragments of comfort. "I see you. It gets better. One sunrise at a time." Cameron began to write back, on torn pieces of newspaper, corners of cardboard, even once on a napkin with a borrowed pen. "Thank you. Your croissant saved my Wednesday. Didn't know people like you still existed." They never used names, never broke the spell, but something in both of them started to shift. Cameron began brushing his hair again. Lillian stopped reapplying her lipstick every 5 minutes. One morning he found a book sitting beside the food, a worn paperback copy of The Alchemist, its pages marked and remarked. Inside the front cover, she had written, "Sometimes the journey finds you." He held the book for a long time that morning, not reading, just feeling. Feeling like someone had taken the time to see who he was beyond the hunger, the hoodie, and the worn-out shoes. And somewhere quietly, without anyone noticing, healing had begun. The plaza was different that morning. It buzzed, phones out, voices hushed but urgent, strangers standing in clusters as if something invisible had passed through and changed the air itself. Cameron arrived at his usual time, hands buried deep in the sleeves of a borrowed jacket, expecting the stillness he'd grown to rely on. But Lillian wasn't on the bench. In her place sat two teenagers, loud and scrolling. He waited 20 minutes, 30, pretending to read, trying not to look like he was looking. No food, no note, no familiar silhouette across the stone. Just the cold and a growing ache in his chest that he didn't understand. Then he saw the headline. On a phone someone had left on the edge of the fountain. CEO of Hawthorne Global steps down amid personal tragedy. His eyes froze on the image. It was her. Hair pulled back, pearl earrings. The same face he'd seen dozens of times, but sharper. Armored. The article revealed everything. Lillian Hawthorne, billionaire, founder of a private equity firm, philanthropist, woman of influence, and mother of Dylan Hawthorne, who had taken his life 5 months earlier after a quiet battle with depression. The article went viral not because of the tragedy, sadly that was too common, but because of the unexpected follow-up. Lillian had sold her company, liquidated her shares, and disappeared. No statement, no press conference, just vanished. Until that week when someone recognized her sitting on a bench in a public plaza, handing food to a homeless man. A blurry cell phone photo had captured it, and the internet had done the rest. "Billionaire feeds vagrant in city square," read one mocking caption. Another headline blared, "Tragic heiress seen giving away food to homeless man in viral photo. Is she okay?" They hadn't mentioned Cameron by name, but they'd seen enough. And now they all came to stare. He tried to leave, but someone called out, "Hey, you're the guy from the Post, right? The one the lady billionaire was feeding?" Another chimed in, "Is this like a stunt? Are you an actor?" Cameron shook his head and walked away. Fast. Backpack clutched tight to his side. Ears ringing. The plaza no longer felt safe. The fountain no longer silent. The sanctuary they had built, out of crumbs and quiet glances, was gone. He didn't return the next day, or the day after that. And when he finally did, late on the fifth morning, just to say goodbye to the space that had given him something he couldn't name, there was a man in a suit waiting for him, gray hair, polished shoes, holding a black folder and a letter. "Are you Cameron?" the man asked. Cameron nodded, instantly wary. The man handed him the envelope. "She asked me to give you this," he said, "only if you came back." And just like that, the moment changed. Again. The envelope was thick, ivory-colored, and sealed with a gold-embossed crest. Cameron didn't open it right away. He sat back down on the fountain edge, hands trembling, the morning rush swirling behind him like static. His name was written in soft cursive across the front. Just Cameron. No last name, no pity, no press. He opened it slowly, carefully, as if the pages might crack from the weight of what they carried. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Cameron, you don't know me. Not really. And that's what made your gift so powerful. You gave away the last thing you had, not because of who I was, but because of who you are. You didn't know that I had buried my only child, that I hadn't slept more than 3 hours in a week, that I'd walked to that bench not out of habit, but because I couldn't trust myself to be near anything sharp or high. You didn't ask for my name. You didn't ask for my story. You just saw someone who looked like she needed a moment of grace, and you gave it. That sandwich didn't change my situation, but it changed me. It reminded me that the world still holds quiet, anonymous kindness, that people still choose compassion, even when they have nothing to spare. That day you fed me, and every day after that, I tried to return the favor. But this isn't just about food, Cameron. It's about the dignity you offered when the world had stripped you of your own. And so now I offer you mine." The letter continued, but Cameron paused, eyes burning. Inside the envelope, beneath the letter, was a second document, a bank statement, a trust in his name, funded anonymously. A note was clipped to the top. No strings, no cameras, just a foundation. Your next step. His mouth went dry. The amount was staggering. Not enough to make headlines, but enough to rewrite the next 5 years of his life. Shelter, food, health, dignity, freedom. He never saw Lillian again. Not in person. But every month, a new letter arrived. Never signed with a full name. Always with the same embossed seal. Sometimes they included poems. Sometimes photos from places around the world. And once just a single sentence. "He would have liked you." Today, Cameron works at a nonprofit for housing insecure youth. He keeps the original sandwich wrapper in a frame on his desk, not for show, but as a compass. When asked how it all started, he just smiles. It started with half a sandwich and no questions. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is see someone without asking who they are.